There is this very specific, like deeply visceral physiological reaction that happens to you when you're sitting in a corporate conference room.
Oh, absolutely. The elevated heart rate.
Right. Your heart rate elevates, your palms might get a little sweaty, you're staring at a slide deck, and a senior leader is proposing a strategy that with absolute data-backed certainty is just going to be an unmitigated disaster.
Yeah, your brain's amygdala actually starts firing in that moment.
Sure,
it's
yeah.
literally flooding your system with cortisol because evolutionarily speaking, your body is perceiving a legitimate threat.
Exactly. And in that moment, you're faced with this brutally difficult choice. Like, you can speak up, dismantle their argument, and risk being labeled as combative or aggressive or, not a team player, which can permanently damage your upward mobility.
Or you suppress it.
Yeah.
You stay entirely silent, watch the train derail, and risk being branded as just this passive participant who lacks critical thinking skills.
It's a nightmare scenario. Welcome to the deep dive into the source material. Whether you are prepping for a high-stakes board meeting, managing a globally distributed team, or you're just fascinated by the hidden codes of human interaction, today's topic is, honestly, an absolute masterclass in professional survival.
It really is a critical survival skill because, the modern workplace is governed by this invisible architecture of expectations. We kind of operate under this illusion that the best, most logical idea will just win on its own merits.
Which is almost never true.
Right? It's almost never about the raw data or the objective truth of your argument. It's almost entirely about the delivery mechanism. If your delivery triggers the other person's defensive reflexes, your brilliant idea, it's never even going to be processed, let alone accepted.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the stack of research and literature we're examining today operates on multiple levels. On the surface, this material was originally engineered as an advanced linguistic guide for non-native English speakers, basically trying to decipher the completely baffling nuances of American corporate speak. But when you look beneath the surface, what we actually have here is a universal psychological playbook.
That's spot on. It applies to anyone, whether you were born in Amsterdam, Mumbai, or Chicago, who is just trying to decode these incredibly delicate, unspoken rules of how to push back politely without, detonating your career.
And that's the mission today. We are going to decode that playbook for you. We're going to equip you with the specific linguistic frameworks, the cognitive psychology, and the nonverbal strategies you need to challenge ideas constructively.
We want to completely reframe how you view professional conflict. Instead of seeing it as this source of deep anxiety, we want to give you the tools to turn constructive dissent into really your most valuable leadership asset.
And I can promise you, by the time we wrap up this deep dive, you're going to understand the neurological reason why a tiny, seemingly harmless three-letter word like but is secretly sabotaging your working relationships.
Oh, that part is fascinating.
It really is. We're also going to explore this leadership philosophy known as disagree and commit, which is maybe the single greatest differentiator between amateurs and true executive leaders. But to really grasp all of this, we need to zoom out first, right?
We absolutely must start there. We can't look at American corporate culture in a vacuum. To understand the quirks of the American approach, you first have to internalize that disagreement is not a fixed, universal concept.
So we have to map out the global spectrum.
Exactly. The way dissenting opinion is formulated, how it's physically expressed, how the recipient processes it, it varies dramatically across different cultural landscapes.
Yeah.
The sources provide this fascinating global map.
Let's explore that map. The research lays out this massive spectrum. On one extreme end, we find cultures that view direct, unvarnished confrontation not as an insult, but as the purest form of honesty.
Right. The literature points to countries like Israel, the Netherlands, parts of Germany.
So in those environments, if you're in a meeting and you think a colleague's idea is flawed, the cultural expectation is that you just look them in the eye and say, your analysis is incorrect, and here is the data.
Yes. And what's fascinating here is the historical underpinning of that directness. Take the Netherlands, for example. The sources delve into this concept of the polder model.
Oh, the polder model. This is about the geography, right? Reclaiming land from the sea.
Exactly. Historically, the Dutch had to literally pump water out of the polders. And doing that required absolute life or death cooperation from everyone, regardless of their social class or wealth.
Wow. So if a dike was failing, you didn't have time to politely cushion the feedback to the local lord.
You couldn't. You just had to shout that the wall was breaking. That historical necessity for brutal egalitarian pragmatism evolved into a modern business culture where directness is morally equated with transparency and trust.
Who's padding your critique with corporate fluff isn't just unnecessary to them, it's actively viewed with suspicion, like you're being evasive.
Precisely. They want the raw, unfiltered data of your disagreement.
I find that history incredibly illuminating. It totally removes the judgment. They aren't being rude, they're just being efficient according to their cultural operating system.
Exactly. Now, let's swing the pendulum all the way across the spectrum. On the opposite end, the research highlights many cultures throughout East Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia.
Right, where open disagreement is handled very differently.
Culturally, openly disagreeing with someone, especially in public, and doubly so if they hold higher status, is anathema. The paramount societal value in these contexts is harmony, which brings us to the concept of saving face.
And face is deeply complex, isn't it? It's not just about avoiding embarrassment in the Western sense.
Not at all. From a sociological standpoint, face represents a person's social standing, their dignity, their integrated role within the community. These cultures often have deep roots in agrarian societies like rice farming communities.
Where survival depended on tight, conflict-free communal cooperation.
Yes, to manage complex irrigation systems. Disrupting the harmony of the group was an existential threat. So expressing a dissenting opinion is always secondary to maintaining that social equilibrium.
You protect your own face by not being disruptive, and you actively protect your colleague's face by ensuring they are never publicly diminished.
Right. If you must disagree, it's done through highly subtle indirect channels, often outside the formal meeting entirely.
So on one side of the globe, we have the tell it exactly like it is model. On the other side, the preserve harmony at all costs model. So where does the United States fall on this map?
The U.S. occupies a highly complex, often confusing middle ground. The literature calls it the American paradox.
The American paradox. I want to spend some time here because this is where the friction really starts. American cultural DNA is fiercely individualistic. It's built on free speech, challenging the status quo.
Yes, you routinely see American executives telling their teams, I expect you to challenge my thinking. Do not hold back.
And they genuinely mean it, right? Because the structure relies on collaborative innovation. They want the intellectual pushback.
They do. But, and this is the crux of the paradox, while the substance of the disagreement is demanded, the form that it takes is heavily regulated. The culture requires that this pushback be packaged in a highly diplomatic, relentlessly positive wrapper.
It's like playing a sport where the coach is screaming, be aggressive, tackle the problem.
Yeah.
But the minute you actually make physical contact with the opposing player, the referee throws a flag and ejects you.
That is a brilliant analogy.
You're mandated to be aggressive in your strategy, but the rules of engagement say your execution must be perfectly diplomatic. You have to be aggressively diplomatic.
Yes. And this paradox is what creates the double bind for international professionals, or frankly anyone new to corporate America.
Let's analyze that double bind, because if you immigrate to the U.S. from a direct communication culture like the Netherlands, and you apply your native style saying, your timeline is flawed, here's the data, you trigger their defense mechanisms.
Instantly, you are labeled as abrasive, combative, not a team player. Your technical brilliance is completely overshadowed.
Conversely, if you enter from a harmony-focused culture in East Asia and default to your native operating system, which might be nodding quietly during the meeting out of respect, you fall into the other trap.
Exactly. American managers who look for verbal engagement as a proxy for intelligence will perceive your silence as passivity. They'll assume you lack critical thinking skills. You're caught in a classic catch-22.
It's an incredibly unfair standard because it relies on cultural fluency that's never included in an onboarding packet. You just have to learn it through trial and error.
Which brings us to the core of our deep dive. To survive this, you have to internalize the absolute golden rule of professional friction in the U.S.
Okay, lay it on us. What is the golden rule?
In American professional culture, you must draw a sacred, impenetrable line between the person and the proposal. You never attack the individual, you only challenge the idea.
Never attack the person, only the idea. I mean, that sounds like basic common sense, but the psychology behind it is deep. Why do we struggle so much with separating our identity from our ideas?
Well, if we connect this to evolutionary biology, the human brain didn't evolve in boardrooms. It evolved in small tribal groups where social status was tied to survival.
Ah, so if your ideas were publicly rejected by the tribe, it lowered your social capital.
Which historically could mean being cast out. Consequently, our brains evolved to attach our ego to our intellectual output. When someone abruptly tells you your strategy is terrible, your amygdala, the threat detection center, lights up exactly as if someone were swinging a weapon at you.
Wow. So you get that spike in adrenaline and cortisol.
And in that state, you are entirely incapable of processing logical feedback. You're in fight or flight mode. These American diplomatic frameworks exist specifically to bypass the amygdala and keep the recipient's logical brain engaged.
Let's ground this in a real-world scenario from the research. We have this example of a colleague named David presenting a new marketing strategy. You realize his strategy is fundamentally flawed because it ignores a massive shift in the under 35 demographic.
Right, you have to intervene.
Let's look at version 1, the blunt approach. You say, David, that strategy won't work. It's clear you don't really understand our under 35 demographic, and frankly, this feels like you didn't do the research.
Now, from a purely informational standpoint, you might be entirely correct, but neurologically, you've just initiated a threat response. David feels humiliated in front of the tribe.
He's going to get defensive, dig his heels in, and harbor deep resentment.
And critically, everyone else in that meeting is watching you. They aren't thinking about demographic data anymore. They're thinking, wow, this person is an unsafe collaborator who inflicts public pain.
So even if you win the argument on the math, you lose the war on organizational capital.
Exactly.
Now let's analyze version 2, the idea challenge. In this version, you say, I really appreciate David bringing this forward, and I can see the logic behind the approach. I do want to raise a concern, though I'm wondering whether this strategy fully accounts for the shifts in our under 35 demographic. Could we explore adjusting the targeting?
The contrast is extraordinary, isn't it? You achieve the exact same strategic outcome, but you completely preserve David's dignity. You frame it not as a zero-sum battle, but as a collaborative exploration.
The text provides a forensic breakdown of version 2 into 3 actionable linguistic tools. The first one is the appreciation prefix. I really appreciate David bringing this forward. My initial reaction is, isn't that just corporate fluff?
It's easy to dismiss it as fluff, but sociologically, it is an act of strategic generosity. Leading with explicit appreciation establishes a baseline of psychological safety.
You're signaling to David's brain, I'm a friend, not a foe.
Exactly. It acts as an emotional buffer. Once his brain registers that you're validating his labor, his defense is naturally lower. He becomes vastly more receptive.
Which transitions perfectly to the second tool, the concession. I can see the logic behind the approach. I found this step to be the most intellectually demanding part.
Oh, it requires deep intellectual honesty. In the American ecosystem, demonstrating that you have actively listened and understood the opposing viewpoint before dismantling it is crucial.
Because you're proving your pushback isn't just a reflexive, ego-driven reaction.
Right, you're elevating your critique from a petty argument to a measured analysis.
So we've lowered defenses with the appreciation prefix, proven objectivity with the concession. Now the third tool, the pivot phrase. I do want to raise a concern, though. This is the linguistic bridge.
It is the bridge between the validation and the challenge. And the architecture of that bridge is incredibly specific.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This connects to our teaser. The research highlights the absolute necessity of eliminating the word but from these pivot phrases and replacing it with and. Why does that tiny substitution matter so much?
It comes down to how the human brain parses language in working memory. The word but functions as a negator. It's an eraser. When a listener hears but, their brain automatically discounts everything that preceded it.
So all that work you just did with the appreciation and the concession is instantly wiped out.
Yes. The recipient subconsciously interprets the initial praise as manipulative, just a cheap setup for the incoming attack.
It's the classic, I'm not racist, but phenomenon. Your brain knows whatever follows the but is the only thing they actually mean.
Precisely. The word and, conversely, is additive. It implies multiplicity. By using and, you are proposing that two realities can exist simultaneously. Your logic is sound, and there's another variable. It allows the validation and the disagreement to coexist.
It's a microscopic linguistic shift that yields massive neurological dividends. Okay, so we understand the basic anatomy. Let's take these tools out into the wild. Let's start with navigating peer-to-peer friction in a team meeting.
This is a unique dynamic because disagreeing with a peer in a public meeting is a performance. The entire room is watching.
They're watching how you handle stress, how you treat your peers. The text gives a highly relatable scenario. Colleague Jennifer is overwhelmed and says, let's reduce our weekly client check-ins to bi-weekly to save bandwidth.
But you know that will cause massive client churn.
Exactly. Her solution solves the internal problem but creates an external revenue crisis. How do you stop her without making an enemy?
The literature introduces a framework for this called AQP. Acknowledge, question, propose.
Let's analyze AQP. Step 1 is acknowledge. In the example, you don't acknowledge her solution, you acknowledge the pain point. Jennifer, I totally understand the bandwidth concern. We've all been stretched incredibly thin.
That distinction is vital. If you agree with her solution, you trap yourself. By acknowledging her pain point, you're deploying cognitive empathy. She feels seen. She doesn't need to fight you to prove she's overworked.
You align yourself with her reality. Which leads to step 2. Question. This is the Socratic method. Instead of declaring, that will cause churn, you ask, I'm wondering, do we risk exacerbating the perception that clients feel underserved if we pull back?
The phrasing is meticulous. I'm wondering, do we risk? You aren't handing down a verdict. You're identifying a collective risk and placing it in the center of the table for the team to examine together.
It invites her into the analytical process, and that sets up the final step. Propose. The research is clear. Identifying a problem without offering a solution is a massive faux pas in American business.
Oh, absolutely. The professionals who get promoted are the builders, not the demolition crew. You must pivot from critique to construction.
In the scenario, the proposal is, what if we took a slightly different approach? What if we tiered our clients? Stable accounts move to biweekly, at risk stay weekly. I want to highlight the pronoun shift there. What if we took a slightly different approach?
Yes, it taps into in-group versus out-group psychology. If you say, what if you did this instead? You're establishing a competitive hierarchy, a zero-sum game.
By using we, you absorb her into your in-group. You frame the alternative as a collective team victory, completely neutralizing the ego threat.
It preserves the horizontal harmony perfectly.
But as complex as peer-to-peer is, the difficulty spikes dramatically when the pushback has to travel upward, against the flow of organizational power. How do you disagree with the boss?
Disagreeing with a manager is the ultimate test of diplomatic finesse. The stakes are profoundly different because the power dynamic is asymmetrical.
Right. This is the person who controls your performance review. And because of the American paradox, your boss will say, I want your honest feedback. But they are human. They're protective of their status.
When you challenge a leader, you are subtly challenging their authority. So the literature shifts from AQP to a framework designed specifically for managing up. Align, reframe, defer.
Let's dissect align, reframe, defer. The scenario. Your manager, Sarah, wants to launch a product feature by the end of Q3. You know the engineering bandwidth isn't there. A buggy launch will hurt the company. How do we apply step 1? Align.
The align step is about proving you share the same ultimate objective. When a manager hears no, their immediate fear is that you don't understand the vision, or you're just avoiding hard work.
So you have to neutralize that. You start by saying, Sarah, I am completely on board with getting this feature to market. I know how critical it is for our competitive positioning.
You establish yourself as an ally in the broader war. You agree that the product must launch. You are only debating the execution.
Then you move to step 2, reframe. This is psychological deflection. You say, my concern, and I want to flag this early so we can get ahead of it, is that hitting Q3 might force us to ship with stability issues.
And what flagged this early so we can get ahead of it? It's brilliant. It reframes your dissent from insubordination to risk management.
You're acting as a sentinel, protecting her overarching vision.
You're demonstrating fiduciary responsibility. And then we arrive at step 3, defer. After offering an alternative, like a phased beta launch, you must explicitly return the final decision to the manager. If you still feel the hard timeline is the right call, I'm committed. But what are your thoughts?
What are your thoughts? You're handing the steering wheel back to her. Some listeners might think, aren't I just giving up? Why bother speaking up?
This is the psychology of autonomy. When human beings feel forced into a corner, their instinct is to fight back to assert control. By explicitly acknowledging her power to overrule you, you remove the threat to her status.
So when a leader feels secure, they're actually vastly more open to adopting your idea because choosing it feels like their autonomous decision, psychological judo.
Exactly.
But pragmatically, what if you execute this perfectly? Sarah listens and still says, no, we are sticking to the Q3 deadline. Can you keep arguing?
This is where we draw a very clear line. Advocating fiercely once using data is admired. If new data comes to light, bringing it up a second time is generally acceptable. But if you continue to litigate after a definitive decision is made, you burn organizational capital. You become a roadblock.
You made your case. Respect the verdict. Now, all of this assumes a verbal conversation, where you can use tone of voice and body language. What happens when you strip that away? Staring at a blank email draft.
Written disagreement is an absolute minefield. It is exponentially more dangerous because of the absence of tonal cues.
The brain defaults to a negativity bias, right? If there are 5 ways to read an email, the recipient assumes the most hostile, condescending tone possible.
Precisely. They project their insecurities onto your words. So you have to over-index on positive language to inject warmth. The source material provides a brilliant case study. Colleague Mark emails a proposal to adopt a new tool, Project Flow. You've used it, and you know it's a clunky disaster.
So you have to hit reply all and tell them it's a mistake. The email template provided is masterful. The very first thing it does is establish a robust buffer, 3 distinct layers of praise.
Let's break those down. First, appreciation. Thanks for putting this breakdown together. Second, validation of effort. It's clear you've really done your homework. Third, praise of motivation. I absolutely love that you're thinking proactively about our efficiency.
If you just give 1 layer, it feels automated. But layering 3 types completely disarms him. His ego is sated, his defenses are down, he's ready for the pivot.
And the framing of the disagreement is incredibly delicate. I do want to share a perspective that might be worth factoring in.
Not a hard no, just another piece of the puzzle. And the grammatical choices using passive phrasing. Instead of project flow crashes constantly, it's we found some limitations with the scalability. It detaches the subjective emotion.
But the absolute genius move is what happens next. The intentional injection of intellectual humility. That said, it's entirely possible the platform has evolved, so my concerns may be outdated.
Counterintuitive, right? Why undermine your own argument?
Because acknowledging the limits of your knowledge is a massive credibility signal. By weakening your absolute certainty, you paradoxically appear more objective and trustworthy. Mark doesn't feel the need to defend his turf because you aren't presenting yourself as an infallible authority.
You disarm his need to fight by refusing to pick up a weapon. Then you suggest a trial or demo as due diligence. It takes confidence to write that email. But what if you don't have that confidence? What if you are the most junior person on the team?
The junior voice. This creates profound paralysis.
You're a 24-year-old analyst in a room full of VPs. You spot a massive data error that will cost millions. Every instinct screams at you to stay quiet. Should you speak up?
The resounding answer in American corporate culture is yes. You have a professional obligation to speak up.
Why would VPs care what a junior analyst thinks?
We have to look at Dr. Amy Edmondson's research on psychological safety at Harvard Business School. She studied clinical teams in hospitals. She found that the most cohesive, effective teams were actually reporting the most errors.
Wait, really? The best teams made more mistakes?
No, they reported more mistakes. In poorly managed teams, junior nurses were terrified of senior doctors and stayed silent when they saw a wrong dosage. In highly effective teams, there was psychological safety. A junior nurse felt comfortable stopping a senior surgeon.
Because innovative companies rely on intellectual diversity to avoid groupthink.
Exactly. The junior voice is unburdened by legacy assumptions. It's the best antidote to groupthink. But you need a framework to deliver it safely. Permission, humility, contribution.
Step 1, permission. I'd love to offer a slightly different perspective, if that's okay. Doesn't asking if that's okay make you look submissive?
It's a power move disguised as deference. It is socially impossible for a senior leader to say no to that. You force them to verbally grant you the floor.
Step 2, humility. I know I'm still new and building my macro context, but you point out your own weakness.
It inoculates you. Their immediate internal reflex is, this kid doesn't know the big picture. By stating that limitation out loud, you steal their ammunition and demonstrate profound self-awareness.
So what does this all mean? It clears the path for step 3. Contribution. You deliver your point using data. Data is the great equalizer.
If you are junior, your personal opinion carries 0 weight, but Q2 retention metrics show a 15% drop is irrefutable. If you have the data, you command the room regardless of your title.
Now, these dynamics get even more complicated when the room is multicultural. Modern American workplaces are melting pots.
Cross-cultural collisions. The source gives a great scenario. Hans, a Dutch engineer, bluntly critiques a forecast model by Priya, an Indian data analyst, on a virtual call. Your baseline assumptions are fundamentally flawed.
For Hans, from a direct culture, he's being efficient and honest.
But for Priya, from a high-context culture valuing harmony, It's deeply face-threatening. It feels like public humiliation. And the Americans are squirming because Hans bypassed their diplomatic rituals.
So what are the guiding principles here?
First, default to American norms if you were in a U.S. company. Second, cultivate cultural intelligence, or CQ. Flex your communication style based on your audience.
Does this mean Hans and Priya just have to assimilate and lose their authentic styles?
No, it's about adding registers to your toolkit.
Yeah.
Like a classical pianist learning jazz. You don't forget Mozart. You expand your repertoire.
And if you witness the clash, mediate gently. Validate Hans's concern while giving Priya a dignified chance to explain her data. To build that toolkit, the sources actually give us a vocabulary phrasebook. Let's look at it.
For low-stakes friction. I think we're mostly aligned, but I'd nuance it a little differently.
For high stakes, I want to respectfully challenge that assumption based on the data. And my favorite, absolute professionalism, the ultimate trump card.
I'd rather raise an uncomfortable question now than deal with a preventable problem later.
It's linguistic alchemy. It reframes dissent as risk mitigation. No one can argue against someone trying to save the company from disaster.
It's functionally bulletproof. But we have to address the reality. You can do all this perfectly, and leadership still decides to go the other way.
This brings us to disagree and commit, popularized by Amazon.
Yes, you have an obligation to debate passionately. Once a decision is made, you must execute it as if it were your own idea. No passive resistance.
No sitting in the break room whispering, I told you this would fail.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, disagreeing passionately, losing gracefully, and committing fully is the rarest trait in corporate America. It proves you are both intellectually courageous and a dedicated team player.
You have the frameworks and the mindset, but all of this collapses if your body is betraying your words.
The silent symphony. Nonverbal cues. Words only matter if the context supports them.
If I say the perfect diplomatic phrase while rolling my eyes and crossing my arms, the body language overrides the script.
Completely. Let's break down the physical mechanics. Eye contact should be steady and engaged. Not aggressive staring, which is predatory, but looking away signals evasiveness.
And vocal tone. When I feel conflict, my vocal cords tighten.
That's the vagus nerve responding to stress. Your pitch rises, signaling anxiety. Or if you artificially drop it, it sounds condescending. You need calm, measured, diaphragmatic breathing.
The face seems the hardest to control.
A slight, genuine, warm smile signals openness, not a smirk. A smirk communicates contempt. And relax your forehead. Furrowed brows make diplomacy feel like combat.
Finally, body language. Open posture, uncrossed arms, leaning slightly forward. The source actually suggests practicing these in the mirror. It sounds silly, but it's crucial because our bodies default to defensive postures when we feel friction.
It's cognitive behavioral training. It requires repetition.
Well, to summarize,
Yeah.
the ability to disagree constructively is not merely a tactic. It is a fundamental leadership skill. The people who advance aren't the yes people or the constant fighters, but those who use constructive inquiry to make the team smarter and relationships stronger.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Consider how your own baseline cultural communication style has invisibly shaped your career trajectory so far. Have you been unintentionally limiting your organizational capital by assuming your native style translates perfectly? Think about one relationship at work that feels stuck, and ask yourself if applying the AQP or the disagree and commit philosophy could instantly unblock it tomorrow.
That's a profound challenge. You now have the tools to turn potential conflict into your greatest professional asset. Please take these frameworks into your next meeting. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. You know, when we talk about career moves, we almost always just focus entirely on the jump.
Right, the exciting part, the new beginning.
Exactly. Like we obsess over the thrill of leaping out of the plane, right? The wind in your face, that brand new parachute of a new job opening up above you.
Oh, absolutely. There's a massive industry built entirely around the adrenaline of the new.
Yeah. Resume writing, interview prep, salary negotiation, all of that. But we almost never talk about the landing.
Which is wild because the landing is everything.
It really is. We don't talk about how you pack up your gear, fold that parachute, and walk away from the drop zone so that people actually want to fly with you again.
And in the professional world, that landing, well, how you execute your exit, is often where the most critical, long-lasting damage is done.
Or the opposite, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's conversely where the most profound bridge building actually happens.
So true.
Like, The data on career mobility from our source material today, it really suggests that the architecture of a truly resilient professional network isn't built during your onboarding. It's built during your departure.
Which brings us to today's mission. So, welcome to another deep dive. Today, we are unpacking a completely fascinating, incredibly high stakes, and honestly, often emotionally explosive topic for you.
Very explosive.
Yeah. We're looking at how to quit your job gracefully in American professional culture. And I want to establish right out of the gate that this isn't just like an administrative act.
No, not at all. It's not just paperwork.
Right. We aren't just talking about handing in a standardized form to human resources and walking out to your car.
Far from it. I mean, quitting is a highly complex psychological and strategic maneuver.
Maneuver is the perfect word for it.
It really requires a level of emotional intelligence and operational precision that, frankly, a lot of professionals simply haven't developed, mostly because it just isn't taught in business schools.
And it's a maneuver that can dictate your career trajectory, your reference checks, and your professional network for literally decades.
Decades, yeah, it follows you.
So by the end of this deep dive, you will understand the precise psychology, the specific phrasing, and the unspoken rules that govern how professionals separate from their employers.
But to really grasp the mechanics of, the American way of quitting, we kind of have to zoom out first.
Right, look at the big picture.
Exactly. We have to look at the global context to understand just how unique the American system actually is, because it is a distinct anomaly.
How so? Like, break that down for us.
Well, if we analyze the global professional landscape, the very concept of voluntarily leaving an employer, it carries entirely different psychological weight depending on where you are.
Okay.
In many parts of the world, leaving a stable company is practically taboo. It violates a deeply entrenched social contract.
Like where?
Take Japan, for example. Historically, there's this structural and cultural ideal of shishinkoyu, which translates to lifetime employment.
Lifetime? Wow, so you stay forever.
Yeah, pretty much. You join a corporate conglomerate right out of university, and you stay. The company invests in your entire life arc, and in return, you offer absolute fidelity.
Right. And even looking at many professional families in India, there's a fascinating dynamic there, too.
Oh, definitely.
Announcing to your parents that you are leaving a perfectly stable, reputable company often elicits the exact same level of shock and dismay, and even family intervention, as announcing you're leaving a stable marriage.
That's a great comparison, because in those cultural frameworks, it is viewed as a betrayal.
It's personal.
Highly personal. It's a fundamental breach of loyalty. The idea is, the company provided for you, they trained you, they gave you status.
Right, so to walk away just because another firm offered a slightly better title.
Exactly. It's seen as inherently ungrateful. It disrupts the whole tribal cohesion.
But the American ethos stands in stark, almost violent contrast to that.
It really does.
Like in the U.S., changing jobs is not just accepted, it's expected.
Oh, completely normalized. And in many sectors, it's strategically encouraged. I mean, we are looking at an environment where the average American worker changes jobs about 12 times over the course of their career.
12 times? That's huge.
And in hyper-competitive, fast-moving sectors like the technology industry or high finance project, that timeline is even more compressed.
Right, like Silicon Valley.
Exactly. Staying at one tech company for more than 3 or 4 years without a significant promotion or a fundamental role change isn't viewed as loyalty.
Wait, really? What is it viewed as?
Recruiters actually view it as a red flag.
A red flag? Wow.
Yeah, it's interpreted as a lack of ambition or worse, a sign of stagnation. The assumption is that, if you were truly a top-tier talent, other companies would have poached you by now.
So the psychological shift for the worker is just absolute. You aren't a loyal subject to a corporate kingdom. You're expected to be the CEO of your own career.
The CEO of your own career, yes, that framing is crucial. You're a business of one.
I love that. A business of one.
You're responsible for your own trajectory, your own market value, and your own growth matrix. And sometimes, the most responsible executive decision you can make for your quote-unquote business of one is to take your human capital to a new market.
Right.
Therefore, the act of quitting itself carries zero inherent stigma in American corporate culture.
It sounds like the American job market is less like a traditional marriage and much more like a professional sports league.
Oh, that's a brilliant analogy.
Right. Like LeBron James trading teams isn't personal treason against the city of Cleveland or Miami. It's just the business of the sport.
Exactly. Players move to optimize their contracts and their chances at a championship.
But And here's the massive caveat we really need to explore. There are still unwritten rules about how you clear out your locker.
Oh, absolutely.
Trading teams is fine. Trashing the locker room on your way out, that will get you blacklisted from the league entirely.
That captures the dynamic perfectly. Quitting is expected. Quitting badly is what destroys careers.
Because it leaves a mark.
It does. It's the impulsive, vindictive, or just operationally sloppy departures that create lasting damage. The network of executives and hiring managers is surprisingly small, even in massive industries.
People talk.
They talk constantly.
Yeah.
Memory is long, and informal reference checks happen all the time behind closed doors.
Okay, so if we accept that quitting is normal and expected, the next logical question is, how do you begin the process?
Right.
Which brings us to what our source calls the most dangerous phase of the entire life cycle, the time before you actually resign.
The quiet phase.
Yeah.
The quiet decision phase. This is the period where you are evaluating your options, activating your network, conducting discrete interviews, and preparing your exit strategy.
And what's the golden rule here?
The absolute non-negotiable golden rule of this phase is total confidentiality. Absolute spill.
Stealth mode.
You do not telegraph your intentions to anyone in your current ecosystem.
Okay, I have to push on that. Not even your work bestie. The person you get coffee with every single morning, who already knows you're frustrated with management.
Not your work best friend.
Yeah.
Not your mentor. Not the person in the cubicle next to you.
Wow.
You treat your intention to leave as strictly classified information until you have a fully executed, signed offer from a new employer in your hand and all background checks have cleared.
There is a terrifying cautionary tale from the source material that perfectly illustrates why. It's about how the corporate dynamic shifts the literal second your secret gets out.
Yes, I know exactly the one you're talking about.
So imagine an employee who just casually mentioned to a trusted work friend that she was, quote-unquote, exploring opportunities.
Just a whisper.
Nothing official, just a casual whisper in the break room that she was taking a few introductory calls.
Word travels with astonishing speed in a corporate hierarchy.
It's crazy.
In this specific scenario, within 48 hours, her direct manager was aware of the comment.
48 hours.
Within a week, she was quietly removed from the steering committee of a high-visibility, long-term strategic project she had literally been co-leading.
Oh, no.
And within a month, and keep in mind, she hadn't even found a new job yet, let alone accepted an offer, her quarterly performance review cited wavering engagement and uncertain commitment.
That is brutal.
Her upward mobility at that company basically evaporated the moment that information leaked.
Let's unpack the psychology of that manager for a second. Why does the corporate immune system attack so quickly? Why the immediate isolation?
Because the moment leadership identifies you as a flight risk, your alignment with the company's long-term goals is fundamentally in question.
They can't trust you'll be there.
Exactly. From a pure risk management perspective, they have to protect the continuity of the business. I mean, think about it. Why would a director assign a critical 12-month strategic initiative to someone who might hand in their notice in 6 weeks?
They wouldn't.
Why would they allocate a limited professional development budget to train you on a new software system if you were just going to take that skill to a competitor?
Right.
They start quietly divesting from you because in their risk calculus, you have already opted out of their future.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You mention you might leave, so leadership stops investing in you. They cut off your access to the good projects, which inevitably makes you miserable, and then guarantees that you definitely will leave.
Exactly. It forces your hand.
But I have to push back on the ethics of this stealth phase. Isn't it fundamentally dishonest?
It feels that way to a lot of people.
Right. Because you are sitting in Q3 planning meetings, nodding along, contributing to a 5-year roadmap, all while secretly doing Zoom interviews in your car on your lunch break.
Yep.
It feels deceptive to the people you work with every day.
That tension is something many high-integrity professionals really struggle with. It feels like a betrayal of trust.
Yeah, exactly.
But we have to distinguish between deception and necessary professional prudence within the context of at-will employment.
Okay, how so?
You are fulfilling the fiduciary duties of your current role right now, today. You are delivering the work you are being compensated for.
True.
However, you do not owe a corporation exclusive rights to your future. Consider the inverse, right?
Okay.
If the company decided to execute a reduction and force a layoff, They would not give you a 3-month heads up that they were exploring opportunities to eliminate your position.
Oh, wow. Yeah, they definitely wouldn't.
They would protect their strategic interests, lock down your network access, and inform you on the exact day of the layoff.
That is such a good point.
You are required to protect your career continuity in the exact same manner.
Corporate loyalty is a one-way street, so you have to drive your own car.
Perfectly said.
That makes total sense. Now, is there ever a scenario where breaking that rule of silence is actually the smart play?
There is one highly specific, exceedingly rare exception.
Okay, what is it?
If you have an exceptionally strong, genuine mentor-like relationship with your direct manager, meaning an incredible baseline of mutual trust that transcends just the current job, and your reasons for wanting to leave are completely structural and fixable by the company.
Give me an example of that.
Say you genuinely love the company culture, you believe in the product, and you deeply respect your leadership.
Okay.
But your compensation has fallen drastically below current market rates.
Yeah.
Or you feel completely bottlenecked because there is no obvious path to a director level in your current vertical.
Right, you're stuck.
Exactly. In that specific scenario, a private, highly candid conversation might yield an internal fix, like an off-cycle equity grant or the creation of a new role for you. Might, but it carries massive existential risk.
It's a high-wire act without a net.
Exactly.
You had better be absolutely certain that your manager views you as an indispensable high-leverage asset to the firm and not just a replaceable line item on their departmental budget.
Because if you miscalculate their perception of your value, you've just outed yourself as a flight risk for nothing.
And we know what happens then.
The corporate immune system kicks in. So for 99% of professionals in 99% of situations, the absolute rule remains. Maintain strict operational silence until the ink is dry on your new offer and all contingencies are cleared.
All right, so you've maintained your operational silence. You've navigated the shadows. You've taken the clandestine phone calls in the stairwell, and you finally have a fully executed offer letter.
The quiet decision phase is over.
Now comes the moment that makes literally everyone's heart race, no matter how seasoned or confident they are. Breaking the news.
The resignation conversation.
Yeah.
This is one of the most emotionally complex interactions you will ever navigate in a professional setting.
It's so stressful.
You are essentially looking someone in the eye, someone who relies on you, and saying, I value our relationship, but I am actively choosing a future without you.
Wow. When you put it like that.
Right. Holding both of those truths gracefully requires immense emotional regulation and strategic planning.
Let's get into the strict logistics of this meeting. How do we execute it flawlessly?
The logistics signal your professionalism. First rule. You tell your direct manager first. Always.
Not HR.
Never inform human resources first, and never tell your peers first.
Why is that so important?
If your manager discovers you are leaving via an automated HR notification, or worse, through the office gossip mill, it is considered a deep professional insult. It undermines their authority, and it embarrasses them.
Right, they need to control the narrative of their own team.
Exactly.
What's the protocol for the medium of the message, like email, Slack?
Do it in person if you are in the same office, or via a direct one-on-one video call if you are remote. Never ever resign via an initial email or a Slack message.
That feels cowardly anyway.
It does. Written communication is for the formal paper trail later. The actual breaking of the news must be a synchronous human interaction.
Got it.
And crucially, do not ambush them.
What do you mean by ambush?
Don't trap them in the hallway between critical client meetings and just blurt it out. Send a brief calendar invite or a message saying, do you have 15 to 30 minutes for a private conversation today?
Give them a heads up that it's serious.
Give them the courtesy of a closed door and a dedicated block of time so they can actually process the information.
Okay, so you are sitting in the room or staring at them on the video feed. The tension is palpable. What are the actual words that come out of your mouth?
Right, the script.
Because wandering into this conversation without a script usually leads to nervous rambling, over-apologizing, or accidental oversharing.
You need a structured framework. It's often referred to in management consulting circles as the gratitude decision transition model.
Gratitude decision transition.
It is designed to be concise, taking about 5 to 7 minutes max, and it is an absolute masterpiece of psychological de-escalation.
I love this framework. Let's break it down. Part 1 is gratitude.
The opening must be anchored in specific gratitude. You do not just offer a generic, thanks for everything, it's been a fun ride.
Yeah, too casual.
Way too casual. You anchor your appreciation in a specific professional milestone. You say something to the effect of, I want to start by expressing how transformative my tenure here has been. When I joined this team, I had never managed a cross-functional product launch. And your specific mentorship in guiding me through the Meridian account really elevated my strategic thinking.
Okay, the psychological engineering of that opening is brilliant.
Isn't it?
Why do we start by showering them with specific praise right before we essentially dump them?
Because of how it reframes the ensuing rejection. By crediting the manager's leadership and mentorship for preparing you for the new elevated role you are about to take, you completely alter the narrative of the resignation.
It's no longer about escaping them.
Exactly. It ceases to be a rejection of the manager or a condemnation of the company culture. It becomes a graduation.
A graduation. Oh, I like that.
You are implicitly communicating, I am not leaving because you are an ineffective leader. I am leaving because you are such an exceptional leader that you prepared me for this massive next leap in my career.
It totally neutralizes their ego-driven defensiveness.
Absolutely neutralizes
They
it.
can't be angry at you for leaving if your departure is framed as empirical proof of their excellent management skills.
Exactly. It softens the blow by validating their professional worth.
And once you've established that goodwill, you move immediately to the second phase, the decision.
And this phase requires absolute clarity. Like a surgical strike?
No rambling.
None. You deliver the news plainly, and the linguistic key here is to use the past tense.
Past tense.
You say, I wanted to let you know that I have made the difficult decision to move on. I've accepted a position at another organization, and my final day will be Friday the 15th.
The power of the past tense there is incredible. I have accepted a position.
It really is.
By phrasing it as a completed action, you strip away their ability to argue with the premise.
Exactly. You aren't saying, I'm thinking about leaving, or I received an offer and I'm really torn about what to do.
You are not opening a negotiation.
Not at all. You are not asking for their counsel. You are simply informing them of an unalterable historical fact. The deed is done.
That phrasing acts as a protective boundary.
It deliberately closes the door on debate. And by immediately anchoring the news with a concrete final date, you force their cognitive processing to shift.
Away from the emotional shock.
Yes. Away from the emotional shock of, wait, why is this happening? Toward the operational reality of, okay, what do we need to do to manage this timeline?
Which creates a seamless bridge into the third phase, the transition.
Exactly. You pivot the energy of the room immediately to the work.
You immediately offer a collaborative operational plan.
Yes. You say, I am deeply committed to ensuring this transition is completely seamless for the team. I've already begun auditing and documenting my ongoing projects, and I would love to spend the rest of this meeting working with you to prioritize my deliverables for the next 2 weeks so I leave this department in the strongest possible position.
Gratitude, decision, transition. It's clean, it's professional, and it leaves very little room for things to go off the rails. Very little.
But that transition timeline you just mentioned, the final 2 weeks, brings us to a massive cornerstone of American workplace culture, the notice period.
Ah, yes, the ubiquitous 2-week notice.
And there is a wild, almost paradoxical contradiction at the heart of U.S. employment law regarding this tradition.
There really is.
Because legally, the United States operates almost entirely on at-will employment.
Right.
Which means, theoretically, I could stand up from my desk at 2:17 p.m. on a random Tuesday, yell, I quit, and just walk out to my car and drive away forever with zero legal penalty.
From a purely legal standpoint, yes. Assuming you do not have a specific binding employment contract stating otherwise, you are perfectly within your rights to sever the relationship instantaneously.
But culturally and professionally,
Executing an instantaneous departure is absolute career suicide.
the 2-week notice is not mandated by statute. It is a sacred cultural covenant. It is the universally expected professional standard that provides your employer a minimal runway to redistribute your portfolio, communicate the change to clients, and initiate the search for your replacement.
What happens if you don't give it?
Failing to provide those standard 2 weeks, barring extreme circumstances like escaping a genuinely abusive or unsafe work environment, is the fastest way to permanently burn a bridge and ensure you are listed as ineligible for rehire.
So, even if you execute the gratitude decision transition model flawlessly and you offer a generous notice period, the manager sitting across from you is still a human being experiencing acute stress.
Very true.
They might react poorly. How do you handle a manager who becomes visibly angry, hurt, or defensive?
It is a common reaction. Sometimes they feel personally blindsided, or they're instantaneously overwhelmed by the realization of the extra workload your departure will force onto their plate.
What's the play?
The strategic response is to lean heavily into empathy, but without ever apologizing for your core decision.
Empathy, but no apologies.
Exactly. You validate their emotional experience, saying something like, I completely understand the disruption this causes, and I know the timing is incredibly challenging for the Q4 roadmap.
Right.
But you hold your ground. You do not apologize for prioritizing your own career mobility.
Empathy for the situation, but no regret for the decision. That makes total sense. But what if the manager goes in the exact opposite direction?
What do you mean?
What if, instead of getting angry or defensive, they get desperate? This introduces one of the most dangerous psychological traps in the modern career life cycle: the counteroffer.
Oh, the counteroffer. This is where an astonishing number of brilliant professionals stumble.
Why?
Because counteroffers are emotionally intoxicating. But from a strategic career management perspective, they are incredibly perilous.
I want to paint this picture for you. You are sitting there, your manager looks you in the eye, they clearly do not want to lose you, or they just don't want to deal with the headache of recruiting a replacement.
Often the latter.
Suddenly they say, wait, we can fix this. What if we authorize a 20% raise effective tomorrow, and that senior director promotion you've been pushing for over the last 18 months? It's yours. Just withdraw your notice and stay.
It's a seductive pitch.
How does a normal human being find the willpower to say no to that? It feels like you finally won the game. It feels like ultimate validation.
It absolutely feels like validation. It hits every reward center in the brain. It feels as though leadership finally recognizes your true market value.
So why say no?
Because if we look at the longitudinal data on career mobility, the statistics are brutal. A massive percentage, often cited between 50% and 80% of professionals who accept a counteroffer, end up voluntarily leaving that company or being terminated within 6 to 12 months anyway.
Wait, 50 to 80%? The failure rate is staggering. Why is it so high? If you get the money you wanted and the title you deserved, shouldn't the problem be solved?
Because the underlying structural and cultural issues that drove you to interview in the first place were never actually resolved. Think about the catalyst for your job search. If you went out into the market because your department's culture is deeply toxic, or your daily scope of work is mind-numbingly misaligned with your skills, or the executive leadership is chaotic.
A raise doesn't fix that.
No. A 20% salary bump does not fix a toxic organizational culture. It just means you are being compensated slightly more to endure the exact same misery.
Right, you're just a better paid hostage.
Exactly. Within a few months, the psychological thrill of the new salary normalizes, and the original frustration returns with a vengeance.
Plus, there's the massive unspoken issue of trust going forward.
The trust deficit is usually fatal. The very moment you accept that counteroffer, you are permanently categorized in the minds of executive leadership as a flight risk.
They know you wanted to leave.
They now possess empirical proof that your loyalty is contingent and that you had one foot out the door. So 6 months from now, when a highly sensitive, critical, new strategic initiative is being staffed, do they assign you to lead it? When the macroeconomic environment shifts and the company has to execute layoffs, whose name rises to the top of the reduction list?
The person who already demonstrated a willingness to leave.
Exactly.
And there is an even more cynical interpretation of the counteroffer, which, frankly, aligns perfectly with corporate self-interest.
Let's hear it.
The company might just be buying time. They offer you the 20% raise today to keep a body in the seat so the current project doesn't crash and burn.
Yes.
But quietly, behind the scenes, HR opens a requisition and starts interviewing your replacement. And 3 months later, when they have secured a cheaper or more compliant candidate, they terminate you on their own timeline.
That exact scenario plays out constantly in corporate environments. By accepting the counteroffer, you are solving management's immediate operational panic, but you have entirely sacrificed your own leverage and momentum.
So if you are staring down this incredibly seductive counteroffer, what is the specific, graceful linguistic script to decline it without sounding arrogant or dismissive of their investment in you?
You must immediately pivot the conversation away from compensation.
Okay, what do you say?
You say, I am genuinely flattered, and it means a great deal to me that leadership values my contributions enough to make this offer. However, I've made my decision based on factors beyond compensation.
Factors beyond compensation.
This move is about a highly specific direction I need to take my career in this next chapter, and I need to honor that commitment.
Factors beyond compensation. That is the impenetrable shield.
It really is.
It clearly communicates that no matter how many zeros they add to the retention bonus, the fundamental math of your departure will not change. It ends the negotiation instantly and respectfully.
Yes, and it preserves your dignity and theirs.
So the verbal gauntlet has been run. You've delivered the news, and you've declined the counteroffer.
The hard part is mostly over.
Mostly. But in American corporate culture, a verbal conversation is merely a prelude. If it isn't documented in writing, it essentially didn't happen.
Very true. Which means we need to discuss leaving a paper trail.
The formal resignation letter.
Yes. The formal resignation letter should be submitted via email to your manager, often copying HR within 24 hours of your verbal conversation.
And what goes in it?
The most critical instruction for this document is that it must be exceptionally brief, highly gracious, and clinically factual. It should state your intention to resign and confirm your exact final date of employment, period.
I feel like this is where a lot of professionals stumble, particularly if they are leaving a really frustrating environment.
Oh, they definitely do.
They view the resignation letter as their final opportunity to write a manifesto. They want to lay out an exhaustive list of grievances. They want to put it in writing that the software infrastructure is archaic, the marketing director is incompetent, and their specific contributions were continually overlooked.
That impulse is rooted in a fundamental misunderstanding of what the resignation letter actually is.
What is it then?
The resignation letter is not a diary entry. It is not a feedback mechanism. It is a legal adjacent document that becomes a permanent fixture in your personnel file. Permanent. Long after your current manager leaves, that file remains. It could be reviewed by future HR directors if an alumni background check is ever requested, or analyzed by legal teams if there is ever subsequent litigation involving your department.
So it needs to be clean.
The document must be absolutely spotless, no grievances, no detailed explanations for your departure. Do not even mention the name of the competing firm you are joining.
Wow, really? Just keep it generic.
Just state the operational facts, express a brief, generic sentence of gratitude for the opportunity, and sign off.
Keep the permanent record completely sanitized. But surely the company actually wants to know why they are losing talent, right? If you have burning constructive feedback, they usually provide a designated arena for that. The exit interview.
The exit interview. It is a fascinating corporate ritual.
Usually run by HR, right?
Yes. It is typically conducted by a representative from Human Resources during your final few days. HR will often frame this meeting as a protected, safe space for total transparency.
Safe space, right.
They will encourage you to be entirely candid, asking, tell us everything. Why are you really leaving? How can leadership improve?
Okay, I have an analogy for this, and I want to see if it holds up.
Let's hear it.
The exit interview is basically like leaving a Yelp review directly with the restaurant owner while you were still sitting at the table finishing your dessert.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Like, you want to be helpful and point out that the soup was cold, sure, but you definitely shouldn't scream at the chef and call his recipes garbage if you ever plan on eating in this town again, because the culinary world is small.
You're exactly right about the Yelp analogy, but I would argue the stakes are actually much higher and far more systemic here.
How so?
A restaurant owner might eventually forget a bad review. HR digitizes your exit interview notes, attaches them to your employee ID, and flags your file forever.
Oh.
The expert advice regarding the exit interview is to exercise extreme strategic caution. You must constantly remind yourself that human resources functions to protect the liability and interests of the corporation, not to act as your personal therapist.
That is such an important distinction.
That confidential feedback you provide, it frequently makes its way back to your manager or the department head, either in aggregated trends or, quite often, in terrifyingly direct, identifiable forms.
So if you rip your boss apart,
if you utilize the exit interview to aggressively vent and scorch the earth, you are actively incinerating your own professional network on your way out the door.
So what is the tactical play if you actually do have negative but important feedback? What if the director of operations really is creating a bottleneck that is destroying the company's efficiency? How do you communicate that truth without becoming a casualty?
You have to translate your personal frustrations into structural management consulting terminology.
Okay, corporate speak.
Exactly. You must speak the language of corporate diplomacy. Instead of stating, my manager is an obsessive micromanager who creates a culture of fear, and refuses to trust anyone.
Which might be true.
Even if it is true, you frame the exact same problem as an organizational design opportunity.
Give me the script for that.
You say, in reflecting on the team's workflow, I believe the department could realize significantly greater efficiency and scale if individual contributors were granted more autonomy over daily project execution. Creating more structured space for independent decision-making could dramatically strengthen team morale and output.
Wow. You just took a bitter personal grievance and translated it into high-level organizational theory.
It communicates the exact same underlying critique to anyone reading between the lines.
But one version makes you look like a complaining, disgruntled employee, while the other positions you as a thoughtful, strategic thinker who is invested in the company's operational excellence.
That's the core of it. You protect your reputation as a consummate professional while still logging the necessary data points for HR to analyze if they choose to do so.
Brilliant. So, with the formal paperwork filed and the HR exit interview navigated with masterful diplomacy, you enter what is arguably the strangest, most psychologically disorienting phase of the entire employment life cycle.
The final 2 weeks.
The lame duck era.
The atmosphere changes the literal minute your departure is announced to the broader team. The social dynamics shift entirely.
It's palpable.
You enter a highly unusual liminal space. You are physically sitting at your desk, your badge still works, but you are effectively a corporate ghost.
A ghost, yeah, that's exactly what it feels like.
You are suddenly excluded from Q3 planning meetings. You are removed from long-term strategy threads. People interact with you differently.
Some colleagues project their own career anxieties onto you and act jealous.
Some are genuinely sad.
And others immediately treat you as though you've already cleared out your desk.
It is incredibly awkward.
You are just haunting your own cubicle, trying to figure out what to do with your hands. And this weird, unstructured 2-week purgatory is where highly competent professionals often make fatal behavioral errors that can completely overwrite years of stellar performance.
Yes. There are 4 major traps in the lame duck era.
Let's examine them. What's the first one?
The first major trap is mentally checking out. The temptation to simply coast, browse industry news all day, and take 2-hour lunches is immense.
It's so tempting.
But succumbing to that temptation makes you a victim of the recency effect.
What's that?
The recency effect is a well-documented cognitive bias in psychology, where human beings disproportionately weigh the most recent information they receive over historical data. If you were a top-tier performer for 3 years, but you spend your final 2 weeks being lazy, unresponsive, and unhelpful, that final impression is what your manager and colleagues will permanently encode in their memory.
That laziness overwrites your legacy. That's terrifying. I imagine there is also a massive temptation to finally drop the filter and tell people what you really think. The classic scorched earth fantasy. You know you can't be fired, so why not complain openly about the boss in the break room?
That's the second fatal mistake.
Yeah.
Bad-mouthing.
Right.
Engaging in that behavior instantly transforms you from a respected colleague into a toxic presence. Your coworkers are staying. They still have to navigate that environment.
You're making it harder for them.
If you spend your final days bad-mouthing leadership, you signal to your peers that you lack discretion and professionalism.
Yeah.
You permanently damage those peer-to-peer relationships.
Which are often the very relationships that lead to job referrals 5 years down the line.
Exactly.
Then there is a trap that crosses the line from poor etiquette into literal legal jeopardy.
The third mistake: intellectual property theft. Taking the company's data.
This one scares me because I think people do it accidentally all the time.
Oh, it is a surprisingly common and incredibly dangerous fallacy. Many employees operate under the assumption, I built this financial modeling spreadsheet from scratch.
Or, I designed this massive presentation deck, therefore it belongs to me.
Right. They think, I'm going to email it to my personal Gmail so I can use the templates at my new job.
But they can't do that.
In the United States, any work product created on company time, using company resources, is the exclusive intellectual property of the employer. Period.
Wow.
Downloading client lists, forwarding proprietary strategy documents, or transferring source code, it triggers massive legal consequences.
And companies track that now.
Modern enterprise IT departments have incredibly sophisticated forensic tracking. They will see a massive data transfer to a USB drive or a personal cloud account on your final Thursday.
They get an alert.
Doing so breaches non-disclosure agreements and non-compete clauses, and companies will aggressively pursue litigation to protect their IP.
It's simply not worth the lawsuit. Leave the templates on the server.
If-
But assuming you avoid all of those behavioral and legal pitfalls, there is still one massive proactive responsibility left. The fourth trap.
Failing to document
Yeah.
the transition of knowledge.
Right. Failing to systematically hand over your responsibilities is the hallmark of an amateur exit. A true professional engineer's a flawless handover.
This brings us to the concept of the legendary transition document.
Legendary.
We are talking about building a comprehensive, deeply detailed guide for whoever inherits your desk.
Okay, but I have to play devil's advocate here.
Go for it.
From a pure game theory perspective, if I'm already walking out the door and in 7 days I will be collecting my compensation from an entirely different corporation, why on earth should I expend significant energy and focus writing a 50-page operational manual for my replacement? That sounds like unpaid labor masquerading as politeness.
I understand the instinct to view it that way. It feels asymmetrical. Why work so hard for a company that isn't going to pay you anymore? But you have to analyze the massive long-term return on investment of that document. That guide isn't just a manual for your replacement. It is a permanent monument to your professional rigor.
A monument.
Imagine this scenario. A month after you leave, a crisis hits. Your former manager is frantically trying to cover your tasks while interviewing candidates. They're stressed to the breaking point.
Right.
Then they open your perfectly organized transition document. It contains every critical project status, every vendor contact, every nuanced password protocol, and a roadmap of pending deadlines. They will practically weep with relief.
Okay, so I see that.
5 years from now, when you are applying for a VP role and you need that former manager to provide a backdoor reference, what are they going to remember? They won't remember the minor mistakes you made in year 2.
They will remember that your departure was seamless and that you actively protected their operations on your way out.
You are effectively buying a platinum tier professional reference with a few days of focused typing.
You are investing in your own future ghost. You are leaving a patron saint of operational excellence behind to watch over your reputation in that building.
That is a very poetic way of looking at it, but yes, that makes perfect strategic sense.
Now, for the vast majority of professionals, a botched transition, if you refuse to write that document or you act arrogantly in your final weeks, simply results in a bad reference or an awkward final handshake.
True.
But for a very specific, highly vulnerable demographic of the American workforce, quitting badly or quitting with imprecise timing carries existential consequences.
Yes. You are referring to international professionals operating on employer-sponsored visas.
Exactly.
If we analyze the mechanics of the resignation process through the lens of the U.S. immigration system, the stakes transform from mere professional reputation to literal geographic survival.
Let's delve deeply into this reality for H-1B visa holders, because I think a lot of people don't realize how high the stakes are here.
The disparity in risk is profound.
While native-born citizens are experiencing anxiety over whether they should give a speech at their farewell lunch or whether it's okay to take their favorite ergonomic keyboard home, international professionals are navigating a draconian legal minefield. One single logistical timing error could legally uproot their entire family.
Exactly. When an H-1B visa holder officially resigns from their sponsoring employer, the clock starts on a strict, legally mandated 60-day grace period.
60 days.
They possess exactly 60 calendar days to secure a new role, have the new employer's legal counsel file a complex visa transfer petition with United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, or change their visa status entirely.
And if they don't?
If they fail to execute that within the 60 days, they lose their legal authorization to remain in the country and must pack up their lives and depart.
A 60-day ticking clock to solve a bureaucratic nightmare with absolutely zero safety net. The safety net simply does not exist.
It does not.
What is the strategic timing required to navigate that successfully?
The absolute uncompromising golden rule for international professionals is this. You never, under any circumstances, formally resign from your current employer until the new company's legal team has officially filed the visa transfer petition with USCIS.
Never resign before the filing.
Ideally, you wait until the petition is fully approved, but at the very absolute minimum, you must possess the official government receipt notice proving the transfer is actually in progress.
Because the danger of acting prematurely is catastrophic. If you get excited, sign an offer letter and immediately hand in your 2-week notice. But the new company's HR department or legal counsel drags their feet on compiling the visa paperwork for 3 weeks.
Your 60-day grace period is burning down. You are unemployed, and you have no legal status to fall back on if the new deal falls through.
Or deals fall through.
Precisely, and deals fall through frequently. Offer letters for international candidates are virtually always legally contingent upon the successful transfer of work authorization.
So if there's a hiccup,
If a complication arises during the USCIS review, perhaps the new role requires a different geographic location, or the job duties are classified differently, requiring a highly scrutinized visa amendment, the new employer might simply withdraw the offer to avoid the legal headache.
and if you've already severed ties with your original sponsor, you are left with 0 employment, no income, and a looming deportation deadline.
The level of operational precision and emotional fortitude required to manage that transition is just staggering. It is an entirely different game being played on the exact same board.
But assuming all the bureaucratic hurdles are flawlessly cleared for native citizens and international professionals alike, the visa is secure, the 50-page transition manual is uploaded to the shared drive, and the final Friday has actually arrived. We reach the culmination of the process, the art of goodbye and post-departure strategy.
Navigating the final day requires a specific kind of grace. There are established corporate rituals, the team lunch, the awkward farewell cake in the break room, the mass goodbye email.
The core directive here is to ensure all final communications remain warm, specific, and entirely forward-looking.
Yes.
This is not the time for passive-aggressive quotes in the company-wide email. No, it's been real and it's been fun, but it hasn't been real fun nonsense.
Exactly. You leave an open door, you express sincere gratitude to the broader team, you highlight a collective achievement, and you provide a professional channel, like your LinkedIn profile or personal email, for colleagues to stay in touch.
But what is truly critical to understand is that the strategic work of quitting does not end when you hand over your laptop and walk out of the lobby.
The relationship management phase is just beginning.
What does a successful post-departure protocol look like?
There are specific, low-effort, high-impact actions you can take in the weeks following your departure that generate compounding interest for your professional reputation over the span of your career. First, within your first week at the new job, send a thoughtful private message to your former manager.
Just checking in.
Reiterate your appreciation for their specific mentorship and express your hope that their current projects are running smoothly.
It cements the narrative that you left on excellent terms. What else?
Exercise extreme discipline regarding your public narrative.
Oh, social media.
When you update your LinkedIn profile to announce your exciting new role, do not succumb to the temptation to take veiled shots at your former employer.
Do not post things like, "So thrilled to finally join an organization that actually values work-life balance and respects its engineers."
Exactly. Everyone in your network knows exactly who you are criticizing. It doesn't make your old company look bad. It makes you look bitter, unprofessional, and like a potential liability to your new network of peers who are reading it.
Right, your new VP is reading that post and immediately thinking, is that the kind of petty public commentary they'll make about my leadership when they eventually leave this team?
You've hit on something crucial there.
Okay.
You must also strictly honor any non-solicitation agreements you signed.
Don't poach.
Do not spend your first month at the new job aggressively trying to poach your favorite developers or salespeople from your old team if you are contractually prohibited from doing so.
Yep.
Word will get back to your former employer, and it will destroy the goodwill you just spent weeks building.
And finally, be a generous and responsive reference for the high-performing colleagues you left behind. If they reach out a year later seeking advice or an introduction, provide it.
Be a resource for them.
I find this entire perspective so empowering. You aren't just leaving a building or surrendering a badge. You are inaugurating yourself into an alumni network.
An alumni network. That's exactly what it is.
You want to cultivate the reputation of being the alumnus everyone is genuinely thrilled to hear from, not the one everyone actively attempts to avoid at industry conferences.
Right.
You want to be the professional where if your name is brought up in a strategic staffing meeting 3 years later at a completely different company, the immediate consensus in the room is, oh, I loved working with them. We should absolutely bring them in.
That alumni network is the invisible safety net and the primary growth engine of your career. It will catch you when you fall, promote you when you are ready, and recruit you for opportunities that are never even posted on public job boards.
The doors you deliberately leave open, the relationships you actively preserve, and the bridges you meticulously maintain, these aren't just matters of polite etiquette.
No, they are the structural foundation of a resilient long-term career.
Which perfectly synthesizes the overarching theme of our exploration today. Every facet of the professional life cycle we've analyzed points to the same undeniable conclusion. Quitting is a profoundly impactful, highly strategic career maneuver.
Executing it properly requires as much planning, emotional regulation, and tactical foresight as securing the job in the first place.
It arguably is the ultimate test of a professional's emotional intelligence and big picture thinking.
It truly is.
And as we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final lingering thought. A perspective shift to mull over on your next commute or while you're out for a walk.
What's the thought?
Think about the people you've left behind in your past roles. The managers, the peers, the direct reports. If we were to call them up right now, today, and ask them for their unfiltered opinion, what would they say about your behavior during your final 2 weeks?
That is a highly revealing metric of character.
We spend an immense amount of time, money, and anxiety trying to be the perfect new hire. We buy new clothes, we rehearse interview answers in the mirror, we read books on how to make an impeccable first impression during onboarding.
We obsess over the start.
But what if the ultimate career hack, the true secret to long-term professional velocity, is actually striving to become the best former employee a company has ever had?
That is a very powerful reframing of how we view our professional legacy.
What if meticulously folding your parachute, expressing gratitude for the jump, and walking away from the drop zone with absolute grace is the exact maneuver that guarantees your next flight will take you even higher?
I love that. Stick the landing.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring, keep building those bridges, and when the moment inevitably arrives for you to make your next big leap, make sure you stick the landing. See you next time.